So carrying on with the Facetto Word application, this time we are going to add, we've done sending messages now, we can send a message. We're going to add the ability to at least view picture messages, and then eventually we can do the, attach from computer and show a picture message and show all the files. But we'll start with the basics of at least displaying a picture message and binding that to view models. So in order to do that, we'll obviously need to adjust this view model that's bound to the chat message item. So that would be the chat message list item view model. And then here we'll need to add another item really for attachment, or specifically say image. And then we can tweak. We can either do one thing, and that's to have an attachment for an image, an attachment for a file, an attachment for specifics that we understand, which is I think what we're going to do. Or you could just have a generic attachment that kind of gives you the file size, the file name, the file type, and then handle it that way. But to start with, I think we're going to have more of a basis of, as we get the data from the server, we'll figure out what type of file it is, and we can have handles to handle those specific pieces of information. Like if you send a link to a website, we want to then display a mini picture of the website. So we're going to have a view model for each type of attachment. So let's start with creating a new file for that. So if we go to the view models, minimize all this lot. And then we've got the chat message list item view model. Let's just copy and paste that. Change this to chat message list item image attachment view model. So nice big name. A view model for each chat message thread items attachment. In this case, an image in the chat thread. So that's that. Then in here we can clear all this off. And we'll start with, we'll probably end up with also a base attachment. But for now, again, let's just start with what we have. So we know an image, we'll probably want a title. So the title is going to be different than the image name, the file name. We might allow them to send a picture and give it a specific title, so almost like a name without changing the actual file name. So that's the point of that. Then we'll have the file size. In fact, we'll also have, as we just mentioned, the actual file name. So that will be the original file name of the, let's just say, attachment. The file size in bytes of this attachment. We have file name, file size. We can have file type, or we can just have, say, extension. So it depends how we want to handle this. We've got extension and file name, but in terms of them binding, we could have that. Or in fact, we'll leave that for now until we need something, like we might handle PNGs or JPEGs differently. So we can always add it later, but let's just leave it like that for now. Then we'll have a public string for the thumbnail URL. And remember, this is coming from the web server when we make the web server. So for now, we don't have a web server. We're just going to, we know we need one though. So we're going to first make a region here. If I can remember how you do that shortcut people were telling me. There we go. Region, then double tab, and it automatically makes a region. Private members, and then this will be private string thumbnail URL. And no, we don't need a. That will do for that. Just want to check if I actually do. So I'm just going to check the commenting I usually do for private. I usually do the full one. Okay. The thumbnail of this attachment. So the thumbnail, we will return the thumbnail, fine. But then in set, we will have so that if the value is the same for one, then we don't do anything. Then if we do have a value, we want to update the value. So update the backing field here. And then here, this is where I'll put it to do now, because the problem with not having the server yet and not getting a lot of stuff that I want to do in this application, we need to start separating core out and adding more things like a web manager, so we can download things and we can query the API when the website's up. All that kind of stuff isn't done yet, but everybody's after, you know, these videos on WPF. So I'm trying to build the website and slowly start building the additional backing code in other videos, but also try and maintain doing some UI videos at the same time. So for now, because we don't have the download manager, we'll simply put a to do and state what we have to do. So this would be originally to download an image from website, you know, from wherever we're getting it from, because we've got an URL to basically a link to a picture on our server's website eventually. And then we would also create a thumbnail sized version, because you'd download the whole, either this would be an actual thumbnail of the file, which is the ideal. In fact, it would be, so we wouldn't create a thumbnail. The server would serve a thumbnail, and then when they click, we could also ask for the full size version. So we download the thumbnail, and then we would save file to local storage and cache, so we don't have to download it every time we look at the picture. And then we would set local file path value, which we don't have yet, which is going to be public string local file path. This is this path here. So once you've downloaded the file and you've saved it to, you know, the local storage on this hard drive in the application's cache folder, which again we've got to build, then we would set this local file path, and this is ultimately what will bind the image in XAML to. So this would be the actual, literally a path on this machine to simply display an image, which would come from setting the thumbnail URL. So you'll see it come together as we go on with this video. So this is the local file path on this machine to the downloaded thumbnail. So we would set the value to that. So then for now, just set the image directly, file path directly. So this is just going to simulate, you'll set an URL, we'll pretend we've downloaded it, and then typically we would set the local file path to wherever the result of the downloaded image come from. But right now we're just going to put a dummy, we'll do our sample Rusty picture that we already have in our application, which we have in images, samples, Rusty. So for now, any picture we specify a thumbnail URL to will always be this image, but it's good enough to get the UI done. And you know that here's effectively where you'd tweak, you'd do this if you wanted to do it in advance of me doing it. So that's I think everything we need for the view model there. We want to rename the class or the file. Rename file. There we go. And then to now make use of this, we first need to have one of these items. So we need to have it in chat message list item, so it's in here. So we would have public, big long name, image attachment. And the other thing I'll mention here is that with doing the Faceto previously and doing other chat applications, I will now strongly recommend that a single unit, a single message coming from the server or being sent always only ever contains one attachment. So you might want to attach a website, you might want to attach, well, a website's a bad example, that's just a string in the message. But you might want to attach a PDF, you might want to attach a file or a video or an image or anything else. In the current Faceto application, the one that's live on the store, we allow multiple attachments in one message. And the issue that leads to is, one, maintaining the cache, the state, the restoration, and the clearing up of a file that could have 9 out of 10 files uploaded and then gets cancelled or deleted or crashed or anything else. Then you've got 9 files left in memory and left on a server in the middle of nowhere. You've also got then handling viewing multiple files and doing a UI to then show you multiple files. You have to do the UI for then deleting and managing attachments before you send them. There's so many additional requirements once you start simply attaching multiple things to a message, and you also lose a lot of the benefit of being able to then directly comment on, say, this single attachment. Well, if this message has only ever got one attachment and you wanted to comment effectively on this image, you simply comment on the message. So then the system that allows you to comment on a message that we'll do in future would be the same. You wouldn't have to do extra work. So simply from hindsight and the fact that I've done this many times before, I would not recommend doing multiple attachments. If you want to send 10 picture messages, that's fine. We simply build the client to upload one picture, send it as a message, upload the next, send it as a message, and process it in that way. Don't upload a bunch of messages, then attach them to a bunch of images, attach them to a message, and send a single message. That's not really ideal at all. So with that said, we've now got an image attachment here, a single one. And we'll, like we said, if we then attach PDFs, we'll have probably another view model like this that says PDF attachment. Specific ones that we want to handle differently, that is. And then we'd have a generic file attachment for everything else that we simply show with, attachment, download, file name, file size type of thing. But the reason we want specific attachments here, as I mentioned, is so we can actually make a visual display differently. So if they attach a video, we can make a video attach model that could actually play the video live inside of the message. And to do that, it's much cleaner to simply have multiple attachments. So again, all this will come clearer as we go forward, but that's just a little background as why I'm doing this. If you're wondering why I'm not just saying, attachment and it can handle all attachments, it can, but we'll have a file attachment for that. And this is then special cases for when we want to handle them differently, like the image where we want to display a full-size picture. So this is the attachment to the message. The attachment to the message, or rather the image attachment. Oh no, the attachment to the message is of an image type. And we now have the image attachment. We want a few helper properties. So we will want, for the UI side of things, we'll want a Boolean, because now what we want to do is, say we send a picture message, we attach this, but we send no text. We simply want to send a picture. We don't want the bubble underneath with the text to show a blank bubble. So we will do a has message one first. That is simply message isn't equal to null. That's all we'll check. Flag indicating if we have message or not. What's he complaining about? Oh yeah, I'm thinking I'm doing a getter. No, oh, in fact, no, it is a getter. I don't need the get set because it's not settable. There we go. So that will simply display true if we've got a message, false if not. Or have any message text. Then we'll do the same for image, and then we do the same eventually for standard file attachments afterwards. So we do have has image attachment, let's say. And this is a image attachment isn't equal to null. Right, so we've got the has message, has image attachment, we've got the image itself. So I think that's all we need for the UI. We can always come back to this if not. So they're the three things we've added to the view model at the moment. And now I think we should be good to go to list item view model. And when we open it, let's at least add some picture message. So the bottom one, notice there's a bit of a new line issue there. Right, so we'll copy and paste this bottom one again. Or in fact, we'll just change this bottom one. So we'll start with a message and a picture. So we'll do the message there, and then we'll simply do image attachment as new view model. We'll set, we don't care about file name, file size or anything for now. We just simply want the thumbnail URL equals HTTP anywhere, really doesn't matter. So this would be the, the thumbnail. This would obviously come from the server, like we're typing here. This would be specifically pulled in from the server, and it would be an URL to an actual image. But it doesn't matter for our case because we're simply bypassing that as we mentioned here and just setting it by default. So we've now got a chat message with an image attachment, and we expect this to show now in the UI. So that's where we need to start going. So we've got the chat message list item control, and we are going to start with, we want, the way I'm seeing it is you can attach a picture and you can also have a message as well. So you want the picture to appear above in its own little bubble. So we need to separate this UI a little bit first. So let's try and figure out where we are with this. We've got speech bubble rectangle, chat bubble anchor, and time container. So the time at the bottom wants to stay where it is. The chat bubble anchor and the speech bubble rectangle, those two things are really specific to this chat bubble. So we want to keep them together, but we need to now have, because we are in a grid here, the main container, we will need to let's adjust this. So we know this is going. Let's just remove this for now. We'll cut it. So Control X to keep it in memory, but that's gone. We now need 2 rows, not 3, because we're going to have the time container and then all of the content. So we'll have a new container, just a grid for now, that's now going to contain all the new stuff. That will want 2 rows again. Let's just paste this back in now first, and we'll cut it again, just so I can clone this here. So this is now the message text attachments grid with 2 rows, because right now we're going to have an image and we're going to have this original. So we recut this now. I've already done that. Border, all the padding's gone funny here. Right, so it's that lot again. So we have 2 grids. We will want another grid for chat message text bubble. So that's what we originally had. I can now finally go in there. So all we've done is move things around here. We've moved effectively this speech bubble and anchor. We've moved from outside this top grid into a main container grid and into a subgrid. And this grid wants to be on row 1 because we want this text to appear below below the image. Just wondering why that anchors the speed. It's up there now. Oh, because this has got grid.row. Oh, so this grid also needs a row because this originally had a row. So all of them have got 2 rows at the minute. There we go. So that's now moved in. That's all the same and nothing's changed. So that should be good to simply minimize at the minute. So if we take a look at what we had, that hasn't changed. So we've removed one of the rows from the top grid because now we've got a sub, instead of it having, you know, this bubble, this anchor, and this text, it's now just got the whole contents and then the time. So remove the row, created a new master grid that's going to have 2 rows, one for an image, one for this text bubble. And then inside, we've specified the second grid already, which is for the text bubble, which then has the 2 rows again, as it did before, and dump them in. So that's shifted all that around. And now we should be left with an area here to now do our image bubble. So this will be image attachment. And then, oh, I know one thing we wanted to do is this whole row for the text bubble. We wanted to set the visibility to the has message. And the converter needs to be, now we'll need a new converter because this Boolean to visibility converter does hidden. And we don't want to hide the bubble. We want to make it completely collapsed, invisible. So if we just quickly make another value converter, Boolean to visibility, copy and paste that. And one thing I will do in the next video is we really need to invert these values because right now by default, if we specify true, it's hidden, and false the other way around. So that's really annoying. So for this new one, we'll fix it, and then we'll go back and fix the old one. So Boolean to visibility gone converter, we're calling this new file. Copy and paste it there. Converter that takes in a Boolean of visibility where false is visibility dot collapsed. Rename the file. Flip these around, so cut this one, paste this one. In fact, I'll show you a new shortcut I keep forgetting to use. You're simply on the line and you hold the Alt key and now press down. You can move the lines around that way as well, instead of cutting and pasting. So we've inverted the logic, so now if it's true it will be visible, and if it's false we want to now change it to collapsed. So that's all we need for that new value converter. So then this can now be that one, and the whole chat bubble now will only be visible if we have a message, otherwise it will be invisible. So that's good. Now let's move on to displaying an image in this grid. So I think for that we will need a border. We know we want the corner radius 10. Inside the border we'll simply want the image itself, and we'll want now the image is inside or rather the path to the image is inside the actual image view model. So we will pass in the image as the data context, and then we'll then have the source of the image being the local file path, I believed. And I think that will be it. We'll need a converter to, oh no, that will be a path. So we don't need any converter. We don't need anything. I think that's all we need to display an image. So I think if we run that, I think it'll actually should work in some fashion. We'll need some clean up and tidy up, but I think that should be Click. Maybe not. Okay. Image. Okay, let's try. Let's remove the binding initially. Oh, hang on, it's not called image, it's called image attachment, isn't it? There we go. There we are. Whoa, that's a big picture of Rusty. Okay, so we're getting there. We've got a bubble. We want some padding here first between the two. That's a bit too much of a, it's obviously butt up against some text. So we want to add some margin to the bottom. So some bottom margin. Let's just quickly recheck that. And now we've got the padding. We're also a bit large when you don't want that to continue to expand indefinitely. So it's good that it resizes. It's resizing with us, but I think we want to put a limit on that size so that it's never too large. So let's just simply put a max width on this of, I don't know, 600. Let's see what that looks like. So that the image can never go, just keep growing to crazy size. That's better. So that's a nice big picture, and that's its limit. You can change that to whatever you like, but I think that's a big enough picture. Otherwise, you start getting distracted with all the, the huge image, especially if there's multiple. We've now got an issue with this isn't rounding the corners, and this is this is often done in multiple different ways, and typically the way you do it is draw a region, or draw like a path, and then as a brush you'd fill that region in, and I don't really like that. That's always like a bit of a hackish workaround, and the problem is that because border gives us this ability to do rounded corners, and we get so used to it and it's so nice, we expect to simply put a rounded border on the border and everything inside clips inside of it, and that's not what happens. So instead of doing like, oh well, we want this image now to specifically be clipped, and then we have to do specific code just to draw an image, but then the next time you want it to be a video clip, you'd have to do totally different code again. Instead, let's make an attachment for any item inside of a border that can then effectively create a region through an attached property that matches its corner radius. So what we'll do is have an attached property on the image that will set, because in order to clip the image, you can do image.clip, and then you can make a rectangle geometry, and then you can specify, I think you specify it in the values, wherever you do, but you basically create a clipping region there. So that's all we're going to do, but with an attached property that will match the corner radius here and create the correct rounded corners. So let's go to attached properties, copy and paste anything, and do border attached properties. And then in here we will call this clip from border property, which basically means create a clipping from the parent border. So we'll say creates a clipping region from the parent border corner radius. Then on value changed, let's first wipe all, well that's kind of the same. We want to first get self, which we'd just call self, and sender is just, can be anything. We're going to work with anything here, so framework element, and we know that'll work, that's fine. Now get parent border. So first if, well, check we have a parent border, and if we don't, we'll simply return. So if not, self.parent as is border with a variable called border, then we'll return, but we'll also, while we're testing this, or we can stay in anyway, we'll just do debugger.break. So instead of just blatantly ignoring the fact and wondering what's going on, if it fails, it'll stop the debugger at this point for us to make us realize we've done something wrong. Then if we do have the parent border, we want to first see if the value is true. If true, hook into events. So if boolean e.new value, so they specified true, we'll hook into events. Otherwise, unhook. So the events we want would be when the border first loads, because we want to get what do we want to do when it loads? Well, in fact, it's going to be the same thing both times. When it's loaded will be the first time we have an actual width, so it's been rendered at this point. Then we can draw the clipping area. But then as well as once it's loaded, every time it changes size, we need to redo delete that, use the same one. So every time it changes size, we need to redo the clipping area, because the clipping region you specifying is an exact rectangle. It's not like a adjustable thing like in a grid where things resize. You have to redo the clipping area every time. So we have to do it every time it loads, or rather the first time it loads, because it only happens once, and then every time the size changes. So if they change the value to false, we'll remove the event handlers. And we will also, probably not in a WPF video, but in a general C# video, we'll also talk about event handlers and unhooking and things, because I'm sure we'll have some memory leaks in this application now that we should start to debug, mainly around, almost definitely around things like attaching properties and attaching events and never unhooking and life cycle changes. So that's for another video though, and it won't harm us for now. So when we set the value to true, which we will do, we'll hook into these two events, and then in the, why is it created two events? Oh no, we don't need that. I can delete that one. They're both handleable by just a rooted event called when the border is loaded and changed size. So now every time the border changes, first we want to make sure the sender is a border. I don't know whether we really need to do that, because we know it always is, because we've attached it here. So in fact, no, not bother doing that. Let's just say for border equals border sender. We know it always is. Then we want to get the child, which should only ever be this property, and can really only ever be it, because if we attach this property and the parent is not a border, we return. So if we carry on, we are the child of this border and we hook into the events. So the only time really this could be wrong here, where we're going to get the child like this, which is effectively, it should be us, is if the child has been changed and we haven't handled unhooking, which is a possibility and it would happen. But for now, again, we'll come back to clean up this. The only other way we could do this is, again, with kind of a lossy, we could place this event handler code directly in here, but then unhooking and hooking wouldn't be the same value. In fact, I know a way around this. We will want to, that's a good way, we'll want to do a private rooted event handler. And this would be the border size changed event handler. And then in here, okay, so can we not do instead then a Let's think of this. Would be maybe a delegate of an action of object and rooted event args, maybe. Not an event, delegate action. And will that work? No. Okay, save me messing around trying to figure out multiple different syntax. There's a syntax here to do this in line. In fact, let me just try. See if that'll give me the hint of what I'm after, what I'm creating here. In fact, I've done this before. We've done this on the unhookable event somewhere. Unloaded equals. So what did we do with this? Oh yeah, rooted event handler. So we did the same thing, but the problem is then we don't get the benefit of doing it both the same. So yeah, we're gonna have to now create 2 event handlers, which is, it's okay. It's not at the end of the world. We'll simply make a helper function. So you'll see why I'm doing this in a minute. I'll explain. So let me just hammer this out. Border and then size changed event handler. So this will be private members so we've got actual properties here now, and then we will hook and unhook from those. And then when the size changes, do the same. Now the difference is we will have now a private helper function, border, and we'll just call it border on change. And then in here now, so we'll stay inside this on value change so we have access to it ourselves. We'll then say border loaded equals S1 E1, and this we'll call border on change S1 E1 setup loaded event, and then setup size changed to do the same thing. So now we initialize the 2 variables here instead of having it in this function, because what happens here is in this function, and in fact we will pass self. So the issue we had before, in fact we don't even need any of those either because we're not doing anything with them. Oh, actually we are. We're doing it with S1. Leave them in. So if we did just the standard rooted event handler and size changed in here with the border, we couldn't get ourselves guaranteeing that, you know, self is this exact item, because as mentioned, if we attach to the border, then we hooked in to the event here, and then the child changes on the border, we're still hooked into the event. So then when the size changes, it tries to get the child, presuming it's us and it's now a new child, and then starts doing things. So the issue becomes when we wanted to get ourselves. So instead of just simply hooking into a method that's outside, we do an internal method here. So we set them up internally so that we can now pass ourselves. So this will be a framework element child. the child element ourselves the border. So now the child we have, so we can get rid of that. Child we've passed in, that's all good. Size changed is never assigned to. Okay, it's assigned to right there, that's weird. Okay, let's ignore that because it is assigned. I think it's just a bit confused there. That's just I think that's a compile time. Yeah, it's a bit strange because you do that and then that fails. So it's definitely assigned to. So that should go away when we've built. Right, back to where we were. So now, anytime the border is loaded or the size changes, what we want to do is get the border, which we've now got, get ourselves, which we've now passed in as a child, and we first need to check, because this is going to be fired both on loaded and size changed, and things like size change might be called before loaded when it's figuring out its sizes, but it's never rendered yet, so it's readjusting all the time. So we'll know when it's fully loaded and we can effectively do something with it once we have an actual size. So we just do check we have an actual size, and that's a simple case of we will do if border.actual width equals 0 and border.actual height equals 0. So if both of those are 0, then there's nothing we can do because we don't have a size to work with. If we have a size to work with, then we can set up the new child clipping area. So we want a rectangle, as we mentioned before, which is a new rectangle geometry. In fact, we can then do inside like that. And the radius x equals, can we do radius? No, okay, we won't do that because we want to set the radius x and y to be the same. So rect.radius x equals rect.radius y. So set effectively the corners of the rectangle, which is what we're trying to do, get the the corner radius matching the same. That will need to be the we don't want a negative value, so let's just make sure math.max either 0, so it never goes below 0, or it'll be the border.corner radius, and the corner radius is, or has, okay, top left, bottom right. So pick the top left, and I think that will be, because obviously you can have corner radiuses all around. So the only limit here is that we can't, a corner radius can have different sized corners. So we're just going to simply have to pick one of them. So we're going to presume the top left corner is the one we're going to clone. So this will only work with corner radiuses that are the same all around, which is pretty much all the time. We never do a weird radius different on any corner. So that will work. But we've also got to factor in the radius has got to take into account half of the border thickness, because if you have a corner radius of 10, then you have a border thickness, you've got to account for that border around it and effectively half of it to get to the center line to give us where the curve should be. So if you have a really fat 50 pixel wide corner, a border, then the corner radius is going to sit halfway between the outer edge and the inner edge of that line, if that makes sense. So we simply have to account for taking off half of the border thickness. And again, we'll just take, say, the left-hand side times 0.5 to give us half. So all that's doing is setting up a rectangle with a corner radius that matches the border's corner radius. That's all it does. Match the corner radius with the border's corner radius. And then we now need to set the actual rectangle size. So set rectangle size to match child's actual size. And this is where I'm saying you have to, This is why you have to readjust all the time, because the rectangle is the clipping area is specific to an exact size. It's not a flexible value. So for that, we need to set the rectangle of the rectangle, if that makes sense. So that will be a new rectangle. That's a simple case of child.render size. And then we assign that finally to the child. So assign clipping area to the child. So child.clip equals rectangle. And that's all there is to it. So what happens here is basically we attach this to, where are we? We attach this to anything that's inside a border, which can only be one thing, at a time. This will then come in, hook into the loaded and changed events. Once it finally gets a width, and anytime it changes size, we will then remake a rectangle that's got the same width and height as the child, but with a corner radius of what the border's got. So it'll create a constant clipping that mimics the border, hopefully. So let's apply this to our image here. So let's do local : clipping border property equals true. And let's run that and see if we get the clipping area. There we go. Now we have a rounded region around, and then when we resize, it should, it redoes the clipping area. So that's now a image coming in. The only other thing here I'd say is this is not how an image would load, because you'd have to download it from the internet. Once you get a thumbnail early, you'd have to then go and fetch the thumbnail. So we will have, where do we set it? Text with entry match property, not that. Where did we? I'm forgetting what I'm after now. What was I looking for? Oh, where we set the early. It's in the actual thumbnail. So at least let's simulate some kind of delay that we're downloading, because this would take time. So let's just add a task.delay of say 2 seconds, and then once it's done. And if you're wondering what that noise in the background is, it's my dog snoring, in case you can hear that on the mic. So after 2 seconds, we will set the thumbnail path. And then this will give us more of a representation of, the messages will load, and then the picture comes in. So there we go. And that works, but that's not ideal. It just like jumps and appears at you. So I think what we'll do, I'll split this video up, because I know people like shorter videos, and we've hit like a good milestone here where we're actually displaying pictures. In the next video, we will animate this in. We'll create some kind of loading, circle here that lets them know there's a picture loading, and then it pops in when there is a picture, and it will also fade the image in whenever it changes. So it's a bit smoother than, just bang in your face. But I think that's a good enough stopping point. I think we've reached a point there where we can now display picture messages, and animating the picture message in and displaying a loading scene is kind of a separate video on showing you how to do that. So I'll stop this video here, and the next video, the very next one I'll do, will be how to animate this in. So hopefully this was useful, and it's shown you how to now get pictures into your chat messages. Again, any comments, anything you want to see next, anything like that, just let me know and I'll get back to you.